여기가 초콜릿 카페인가 봐요. 보면은 소품 같은 것도 꼭 초콜릿으로 만들었어요.
먹어도 될까요?
그럼 우리 하나씩 먹고 시작하자.
좋아요. 맛있다. 근데 이번 주 게스트는 초콜릿과는 상관이 없지만은 그 한인 입양인의 대부라고 불리는 팀 홈, 그 세계 한인 입양인 협회장님이시죠.
세계 한인 입양인 협회 회장님이시면 한국에 계신 분은 아닌 것 같은데 요즘에 무슨 이슈거리라도 있나요?
3년에 한 번씩 세계에 흩어져 있던 한인 입양인들이 모이는데 올해가 바로 서울에서 모이는 해야.
해외장이 많은 건 알고 있었는데 협회까지는 좀 몰랐네요.
그 세계 각국에 10,000명 넘는 회원들이 있어요.
다들 핏줄 찾기 목적으로 오는 건가요?
그러니까 예전에는 보통 자기의 어떤 뿌리나 이런 핏줄을 찾으려고 오는 목적이 많았는데 지금 분위기가 좀 바뀌었다고 해요. 우리나라의 문화를 알고 싶다거나 아니면 이제 사업 파트너로서 좀 이렇게 좀 더 알고 싶고 이런 목적으로 많이 온다고 하더라고요.
근데 예전에는 그 입양인들이 모국을 찾는다 그러면 약간 좀 안 돼 보인다고 해야 되나? 좀 그런 게 있었는데 요즘은 좀 그런 분위기가 아닌가 봐요.
팀원 회장님 인터뷰 기사들 쭉 보면요. 그런 말이 많은데 더 이상 입양인들을 동정하거나 미안해하지 말라는 그런 말이 많더라고요.
이번에도 행사 일정을 좀 살펴보니까는 그 모국에 대해서 좀 더 알고 싶다 뭐 이런 느낌이 있었는지 다양한 그 문화 행사 프로그램이 되게 많아요.
어떤 것들이 있어요?
어메이징 레이스는 뭐예요? 무슨 게임 같은데 재밌어 보여요.
참가자들이 조를 나눠서 서울의 구석구석을 알아보는 릴레이 게임 같은 거예요. 예를 들어 교통카드 구입해서 지하철 타기라든지 경복궁에 가서 인증샷 찍기라든지.
근데 팀원 회장님은 어떤 분이세요?
일단 성공한 사업가라고 할 수 있을 것
아
같아요.
근데 혹시 팀원 회장님도 입양아 출신이신가요?
네, 한국에 뿌리 찾기로 왔다 갔다 하시면서 와이프도 만나셨다고 하더라고요.
세계 각국에 흩어져 있던 입양인들을 한데 모으는 것도 쉬운 일 아니었을 것 같아요.
자세한 이야기는 쇼를 통해서 물어보면은 다 아시겠지만 자료조사를 해보면 해볼수록 굉장히 뭔가 이렇게 좀 보통 분은 아니시다는 그런 느낌이 많이 들어요.
뇌졸중으로 5번이나 쓰러졌었는데 모두 다 회복하셨다고 하더라고요. 정신력이 정말 짱인 것 같아요.
뭔가 에너지가 넘치시는 분 같아요.
그러면 여기서 키워드를 한번 정리를 해볼까요? 자, 첫 번째는 아무래도
저는 그 세계 한인 입양인 협회 이게 뭔지 정체가 궁금한데요.
근데 그 모국을 바라보는 입양인들의 태도가 되게 달라진 것 같아요. 그러니까는 입양인들이 한국을 좀 대하는 어떤 태도라든지 시선 같은 것도 어떻게 달라졌는지 그런 얘기를 좀 들었으면 좋겠어요.
한국의 그 스태투스도 달라져서 그런 것도 있겠죠. 네. 그러면은 하나 더 하시죠.
저는 그 협회회장 팀원이란 분이 어떤 분인지 개인사가 궁금해요.
팀원은 누구? 이 정도면 될 것 같죠? Years after the end of the Korean War, Korea has made remarkable progress in its economic growth. But Korea is the only OECD nation to send its children overseas for adoption. Roughly 200,000 children are adopted internationally so far. But many still feel a connection to their birth country. And here to help us understand them better is Mr. Tim Home, president of the International Korean Adoptee Association. Mr. Home, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So 200,000 Korean adoptees living overseas, that's a big number, almost a small town in itself. Are they all members of IKAA?
No, they're not. A number of them do not have any membership whatsoever because they're not necessarily in cities that have the local associations. So we're really a consortium of the various local associations within each of the either cities or countries.
Could you tell us a little bit about the IKA? When was it formed? Why was it formed? How many members you do have right now?
Well, first of all, we do have about a little over 10,000 members, and those are members within our local associations. We do have 11 local associations within 7 countries, and we started in about 2004 discussing the concept of it, and then in 2007 we formalized and became an association within the U.S.
Why did you feel the need to form the IKAA?
It wasn't exactly my choice, but so many of the European groups would meet together and travel and get together for various activities. And the number of the U.S. cities were doing the same thing, but apart. So this was sort of a way for us to be able to get together. So now we try and have annual conventions back and forth between the U.S. and the United and Europe. And then once every 3 years, then we come to Korea.
So the main purpose of the gatherings, the ones that are taking place in Korea every 3 years, isn't so much to find their birth parents, it's more to network, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Some will do birth search, but the majority are here more to just share their own experiences with each other and also to just network and to find friends. We've had issues where siblings have grown up in different countries and been able to come to a gathering and meet each other for the first time. There's others who have met a friend maybe 20 years ago and now they've been searching for them, and so coming to a gathering gives them an opportunity to maybe have more people together from different countries that hopefully they can find somebody.
But I guess the reason that you would have it in Korea as opposed to the US and Europe is special for a lot of the attendees, the adoptees. For many, it will be their first time visiting Korea.
Typically about 25% are back to Korea for the first time. It's always interesting to me when especially the older adoptees are coming for the first time, because I feel that they're almost more emotional when they come. Whereas those in their 20s, it's just another trip, and it's out of college, out of work, whatever, they can come and enjoy being here. But I think for the older adoptees, it really is a meaning because some of them remember their time here as children, because a lot of the older adoptees were older when they were adopted.
But they never came to Korea because they didn't know how to come to Korea, or they didn't know who to contact. If they got here, who they would meet. Is that some?
I think some of them were just afraid.
Okay.
If when you think about traveling halfway around the world, and you may not have done a lot of traveling in your life before, so now you're coming to a country that even though you have this connection to, they're very foreign coming here, and they have these impressions of Korea that may not necessarily be true, but it's something that they've heard and seen. So they, seen on television or whatever, so they want to be able to come and experience it, but they just don't have the wherewithal to get here. And this gives them a good excuse, because now we have 400, 500, 600 people from all around the world that will come, and chances are they may know somebody that's going, make it a little bit more comfortable for them to show up.
So in addition to the birth searches, what else does the IKAA provide, especially through these gatherings every 3 years?
Well, we try and set up a program that has a wide variety of interests. Everything from sessions on birth search, or living in Korea, how to come to Korea, maybe go to school in Korea, to having a soccer tournament, to having a film festival, having this year a food demonstration. Everyone loves Korean food, so it gives them a good chance to see how it's made. It gives them a good excuse to taste a lot of things. But we have speakers that come, and just a lot of different variety of activities that we can provide to the adoptees.
So do any of the programs have the attendees interacting with the locals, the Koreans?
Not a lot of the sessions, but a few of them do. And one is this contest that we're actually holding, which will get the adoptees out into the public, and they try and get the public to help them with certain activities. Another is a research symposium that we hold during the week that the public is invited to come to and listen to what some of the adoptee research is around.
So Korean adoptees from around the world gathered in Seoul for the first time in 3 years, and our cameras went to take a look. Many Korean adoptees have visited Korea to participate in the IKAA Gathering 2013. But why are they gathered on the field? They're here to participate in the most popular IKAA Gathering program, the Adoptee World Cup Games. This International Korean Adoptee Association's event strives to provide the families of the Korean adoptees with a meaningful time through various programs, including Korean cultural experiences and fellowships.
Today we're at the 2013 ICA Adoptee World Cup tournament, and it happens about every 3 years since 2007. It's been a hit ever since, and it's one of the events during the gathering that everybody looks forward to the most.
A total of 6 teams divided according to nationality will play 30-minute games in 2 halves to win the tournament. The Korean adoptees are wearing uniforms according to the nationality they were adopted into, such as Denmark, Sweden, and Finland. However, this tournament gave them the opportunity to think about Korea, the country where they were born. The highlight of today's event is the friendly match with the football club of the Ministry of Health and Welfare. The Ministry of Health and Welfare manages the Korean adoptions.
입양인들도 어디까지나 한국에서 태어난 사람이기 때문에 국가의 귀중한 자산입니다. 저희들이 쭉 관리를 했어야 되는데 뒤늦게 이렇게 국가에서 이런 좋은 기회를 통해서 관리한다는 것은 굉장히 의미가 있고요. 저희들하고 친선 경기를 통해서 고국에 대한 의미를 다시 새기고 저희들도 입양인에 대한 책임을 끝까지 지는 자세를 가질 겁니다.
True to the friendly match spirit, everybody enjoyed the game itself, regardless of the outcome.
It was a lot of fun to see everybody from different countries coming together and playing together. A little disappointing at our result, but next time we'll win.
It's been a great event this year as well. This is the 3rd event of the World Soccer Tournament. It's very well organized, and I think everyone is very happy about the games.
Korean adoptees from around the world have gathered with one thing in common: being Korean. Their valuable experiences and efforts to find their identity and roots as a Korean are truly laudable. So it seems like you have a lot of interesting programs, and in particular, the Amazing Race sounds very interesting and just a lot of fun, actually. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, we actually started it because my daughter and I both like to watch the CBS version of Amazing Race, and we're very interested in how they travel around the world to do these various activities. So we decided we'd try and do one within Seoul, and so starting in 2010, my daughter did all the planning for it and had all the locations around Seoul, and it gave people a chance to learn how to use the subway, find their locations, take pictures of various things, get people involved. And so this year we're expanding it a little bit so that it becomes a scavenger hunt in that they have to actually find certain things or find a type of person that they could take a picture of. And they're doing everything from getting someone to participate in Psy's Gangnam style dance to whatever other activities. I think they have 7 stations that they have to go to and perform an activity and film it, so then we can help determine who got the most points and did it in the fastest amount of time.
So like the original Amazing Race, they work in pairs then, is that right?
Well, because we have so much interest this year, we're having groups of 7 or 8 people go together. Partly because we don't want them getting lost either. We had one team last time get lost, and they showed up about 3 hours after everyone else.
And they don't speak Korean? They had no trouble with communications?
They had some trouble with communication, and they do have Korean volunteers that go with them. But they're only supposed to help with translations. They're not supposed to tell them how to get someplace. So we want people to get out of their shell and try as much as possible to do it on their own.
So you mentioned before that you've also organized a food experience and also a film festival. And I know that the movie Susan Brings Arirang, about an adoptee, I think, living in Sweden, probably caused a sensation in Korea, but I guess among the adoptees living overseas as well. What is the focus for this year's film festival? Do you have other films that are like that, or?
Well, our general focus is the crossing borders and bridging cultures. But the film festival is more based on what's available at the time. So we have, I think we have 5 films that we're showing. One's a documentary on the Korean War, where it follows 4 elderly families who have been displaced because of the Korean War. And then others are just their own personal experiences coming back to Korea and whether or not they found birth family or not. It's more just a chance to be able to go and see and then discuss with the filmmakers, because 4 of the filmmakers will be at the sessions and talk about their process going through and why they decided to make the film and maybe the difficulties they had in filming. Because not all the families want to be filmed or want to be on tape as to what their history was like. But then on the food festival activity, we actually have 8 adoptees who will be trying to copy what a master chef is doing for a meal. And I'm guessing we're going to taste at least some of that.
Hopefully.
We'll see what it turns out to be, because all of these are amateur chefs. And they had to submit proposals as to what they've cooked in the past. And they chose some people for that. Some are good, some are not so good. So it'll be very interesting to see how that turns out.
And the master chef is a Korean, a local chef? Or?
It's a Korean adoptee chef who's here and is working at a local restaurant, and unfortunately the name of the restaurant escapes me. He's a fairly young adoptee, in his 20s. And I think will be showing them how to make a certain type of meal, and it'll be up to them to try and recreate that meal.
Going back to movies, though, I imagine there's so much maybe history and there's so many interesting stories that when the adoptees or the attendees watch these documentaries and like Susan Brings Arirang, these films, do they empathize? Is it a common story that many of the adoptees share, or is everyone's experience completely unique and should be turned into a movie in itself almost?
I think in general, the stories are the same, but in reality, they're all completely different. Just like any person, everyone has their own unique history.
Right.
It's more on how their take is on that history. And then who interacts with that history is what kind of makes up the film. And I think what Susan Brings did was nice. My daughter and I were actually in Sweden the year after she passed. And her daughter was there to help do a memorial service for her. And so with the Swedish group, because she was part of that group, we had a very nice session with the daughter and the film as well.
Now, that movie, Susan Brings Arirang, I think was quite an eye-opening sort of, I'm not sure, experience is the right word, because I think it opened our eyes to some of the real difficulties and challenges that adoptees must face. But at the same time, maybe they're not appearing on film. There are, I'm sure, a lot more adoptees who grow up very happy with warm, loving families, and they do very well in their careers or whatever they decide to do. Is that right?
That's correct. I don't know the numbers, but by far the largest group that I've talked to have seemed to have happy, full lives. A number of them never are interested in coming back to Korea. They don't have any urge to go back because they're satisfied with their place in life. And they've got families and careers, and that's their family now. If they come back to Korea, it's more of a chance to maybe see where they came from, but it's not necessarily a pull for them. And I think that, depending on who you speak to, if it's somebody who's had difficulties in life, then they think that lots of people have had these same difficulties. But still, I think that many more people have had pretty decent lives growing up and are satisfied with who they are and their place in life.
You mentioned before that a certain portion of the participants in the gathering, you would say about 70%, have generally been happy with their with their
I
adoptive
would,
families?
yeah, I
and-
would think so. Yes, and maybe it's more than that. I think that depends on maybe the age group too. I think a lot of us were maybe more happy when we didn't have all the social media and whatnot to tell us we were upset or angry. So I think the numbers are probably pretty high as being pretty satisfied.
So that means we shouldn't have to regard adoptees or treat them with pity or have guilt. Is that right?
I would sure hope not, because I don't feel like at my age, particularly, that I would need anyone's pity. I don't feel that that I need to worry about what happened in the past. I was adopted. To me, that's a point in time. I have to move forward. If I was born into the family that I was adopted to, I would feel the same way. I had to make my own way, and the family supported me, and they were there for me to help do that, and I was grateful for that. But I think for the most part, we're adopted, but we're just regular people too.
Right.
And that's really what we're trying to show through the gatherings, is that no matter who we are, we can still get together and do all these things, and we can have a good time, and we can enjoy where we are and what we're doing. We don't need people to feel sorry for us, because we don't feel sorry for us.
Right. You mentioned that you were adopted as well. When were you adopted, and when did you first come to Korea?
I was adopted in 1959, so many years ago. My number for the agency is actually a 4-digit number. So I was in the 1200s out of 200,000. So very, very early in the adoption history. I think that being able to be adopted at that time, there certainly were differences and challenges that my parents faced, because I went to a family and a home that was in a small town that had no other Asians, and very few people have even heard about adoption, and certainly not adoption from a foreign country.
I can't imagine what it was like growing up in that town then.
It was very strange, because they also adopted 2 children from Korea, myself and my sister, although we're not birth related. So we were the only 2 Asian faces in the whole town. Everyone else was Caucasian. When I got to high school, one Japanese family moved in there, and so everyone that I knew said, "Oh, you should meet this person." And why? She might look a little bit like me, but I have nothing in common with her. And that's, I think, what a lot of the people in the different cities and towns and countries look at, in that they're somewhat alone as far as their physical features for where they grow up. If you grow up in a large metropolitan city like New York or LA, you don't feel that. And so those adoptees that have grown up may be a little bit more understanding of their self as Asians, maybe not necessarily Korean. But if you grow up in a small town or a country that doesn't have many Asians, then that becomes a difficult position.
So it must have been a shock when you first came to Korea, and now you're surrounded by people who look like you, and they also look like you. They look at you and expect you to behave like another Korean, speak Korean, act Korean. So how was that experience like?
When I come to Korea, the difficulty was that there was still martial law at that time. So we had to be somewhat escorted around, even though we were more or less free to go where we wanted. But once we got outside of Seoul, it was really different, because of so much farmland, and the oxen were still pulling the plows in the fields. And just to me, just seeing the multitude of people around Seoul was just mind-boggling to me. But the smells and the sounds and going to the markets and everything was very overwhelming to me. And I think I was very thankful that we were on this whole trip, because the people there had experienced this before and knew how to handle the emotions for it. They actually took us to the agency and saw the handicapped children there and the newborn babies that were there. And being able to to just see what they were doing and the process that they were going through at the time. Because even in '77, there was still a lot of children being available for adoption, and a lot of handicapped children that had no means to survive without the agencies. It was sort of a heart-wrenching experience, but at the same time, it was a sense of me thinking that maybe this really was where I came from, because it was just a word on a map before. And I really started feeling that sense that I wanted to find out more. And that's why I started studying about Korea and learning more about the history. I found out later when I got married that I think I know more of the history of Korea than my wife ever knew growing up here.
On your first trip, you were part of a group, is that right?
Yeah.
Group of Korean adoptees?
That's right. It was a motherland trip, and it was their third motherland trip that they had hosted. And of course, we had news media following us all over. I remember being on a radio show, and the interviewer asking the girl that was with me, because she had a little bump on her forehead, and asked her if she had a boyfriend, because they said if you have a little pimple or something, I guess it meant that you had a boyfriend or someone that liked you or
on
something.
Your cheek. Yes.
Oh, is that it? Okay. And she didn't understand what it was for, and so she gets beet red while they're asking this question.
Pointing out her pimple to her, that's
Right.
not very nice.
Yeah, pointing out to the public in general for it. Luckily, it was on the radio, so no one could see her. But yeah, we came on the trip in '77. It was extremely eye-opening, because I'm from this small town with no Asians, going into a country that has millions of Asians, and I don't know, I almost feel like I held my breath for 2 weeks while we went around. It was a pretty amazing experience.
Now, Mr. Holm, you're a very successful businessman, and you're very positive, and you're always smiling, but I can imagine how difficult it was growing up in a very small town, like you said, being the only of 2 Asians for a very long time. So when was the most difficult or perhaps confusing, challenging part, and how did you manage to overcome that?
It seems kind of silly now, but my senior year of high school, there was a girl that I liked, and we wanted to date, and because I was Asian, her father wouldn't let me, or wouldn't let her date with me. And that was the first time I ever felt any racism towards being an Asian. But prior to that, my family had always embraced me and felt that I was part of them. And it might have been that way because they had 2 birth daughters, but they were both in high school when I and my sister came over. So by the time I was old enough to be aware of what was going on, they were out of the house and married. So it was just my younger sister and I there. And I had never felt anything against me, because I'd always played sports and team sports, and I was lucky to be fairly good at most of the sports.
So you were popular too.
Yeah, people looked at me and they were fine with me. If I had been maybe a geek or something, maybe they wouldn't have thought so much. But luckily back then there were no computers and whatnot, so you had to play sports.
So did that hurtful moment by the father of that girl also kind of nudge you to want to visit your homeland? I guess that would have been maybe a year or 2 before you actually came, right?
It did nudge me toward that, but it also nudged me towards, once I went to college, to start looking at maybe Asian women as a dating source instead of Caucasian women. So. But it was, I think that definitely started me towards maybe I should look a little bit more towards my history and see where I came from and how maybe I fit into that.
The word family stirs up a sense of longing in everyone. And as Mr. Tim Holm and his daughter Jackie work together, we ask what family means for adoptees.
The first day of the IKAA Gathering 2013 event. Korean adoptees that left their homeland as children have come back as young adults. The 700 Korean adoptees that participated in this year's event show the size of IKAA. IKAA President Tim Holm leads this great network of Korean adoptees with over 10,000 active members in the US and Europe. While leading the organization, he overcame 5 strokes with a strong will.
A lot of people didn't believe that he could pull off the 2010 gathering because of his strokes in 2009 and just how bad they were. Because no one, I mean, once people heard that he was actually paralyzed, he could not speak, it was frustrating for him because he couldn't communicate with people, and then he also, couldn't do things that he was used to be able to do. But I think for him, just being able to get back on his feet, within 3-4 months is amazing by itself. And then being able to pull off this gathering in 2010 and then again in 2013 I think that's very motivational, inspirational, just amazing.
Under the theme, The Power of Networking, Crossing Borders and Bridging Cultures, various programs such as an international symposium, Korean cooking contest, and a guided tour of Seoul were prepared. The IKAA gathering focused on providing opportunities for the adoptees to experience Seoul and enjoy the Korean culture.
I think the most valuable part of it is seeing all of these people that have a similar background in history as me, but they're from, I think, we represent 21 countries or something, and to see somebody from Denmark, somebody from Australia, and then myself from the United States come here to Korea and have this community is just so valuable. It's really kind of an incomparable experience.
With different stories, the Korean adoptees have revisited their homeland.
I met her this morning. I met the whole family, a brother, a sister, a uncle, and an aunt, and then the father, and then the brother's actually my twin brother. I never tried until about 6 months ago. So when I knew that I was coming out for the conference, that's what kind of got me thinking about wanting to contact.
It's time for Korean society to accept Korean adoptees as a member of the Korean society and acknowledge them as global talents with Korean roots.
For so many of them, 25%, it's their first trip back to Korea. So we want to be able to show them that Korea has some exciting things for people to do, as well as just being able to come and do a birth search. Because so many people can't do a birth search or look at their files. So it's really nice, I think, to be able to come and experience with other adoptees. So that's not so scary to come by yourself, so you have an excuse to come with lots of other people.
So Jackie tells us that you are a very, very strong person. You've survived 5 cerebral hemorrhages, and you managed to learn to walk and talk again in just 3 months. How is that possible?
Good doctors, I guess. When I had the strokes, I had the 4 on one side to start with, and it only affected my left side. And so I was able to recover from that pretty quickly. So I was up and walking in about 4 days. But then after the 6th day, I suffered the more massive stroke on the right side. So then both my legs didn't work, and my arms didn't work very well either. So I was in the rehab center for about 3 months and had to relearn walking, even speaking, writing, buttoning my shirt. It was very difficult.
And that's when the can-do spirit kicked in again, I guess.
The can-do and the doctor telling me that your daughter is 17 years old. You want to be strong for her and make sure that you could see her graduate and get married and have children. So plus I would look around the rehab center, and I was the youngest person there. And I would look at some of these people and think, why did this happen to me? I see so many Americans that are so overweight and smoking, drinking, and they don't have a stroke. So when I would ask the doctor about that, he said, well, you don't see them because when they have it, they just die. Luckily, I didn't die.
When people start asking that question, why does this happen to me? It can lead to a tricky place, I think. How did you manage to come out of it?
It was very difficult, but having my wife and daughter support, I think, was really the key for it. And just having good friends that would stand by me really helped as well. My wife would drive to the hospital and the rehab center every day to make sure I would do the things I'm supposed to do, and I had a 4-hour session every day between physical therapy and occupational therapy and speech therapy. And because the speech therapist had never heard me speak before, we actually brought out a DVD from one of the earlier gatherings where I had an opening speech. And so she could learn what my intonations were and how I spoke, and was able to, she said, my goal is to get you back to that point. And she did pretty well.
Well, you look the picture of perfect health, and you look very young for your age. I was quite shocked when you just revealed your birth year. So let's go back to the IKAA then. You said that the members are here not just to find their birth mothers or their birth families. They have actually plans for their future in Korea. In what ways?
Well, we're doing a business symposium, and a lot of them will be here to not only interact with how to do business in Korea, but also how to do business within our own countries as well, and between our countries. And so we're trying to discuss how we can generate more interaction between Korea and Europe and the US, and trying to make those network choices with each other that we can just try to sustain not only what we're doing, but also what the rest of the organizations are doing as well. We want to be able to have more opportunities for the adoptees to come, because every time we do come, we like to increase the variety of things that we do. We don't want to repeat what we're doing every time. And so if we can come up with new ways to provide interest to different adoptees, I think we'll just continue to do that.
Obviously, that would mean answering what they're interested in, what they want to do in Korea. What are some of the trends, or what are they most interested in?
Well, you know, we first came and a lot of people wanted birth search and then education, and then now that we're looking at jobs and families. We actually have 40 children on this gathering, all under the age of 12. And so we've had a pretty good family program where they're going to different activities around Seoul, the Folk Village and the Grand Park and Gyeongbok Palace and whatnot. So I think the focus becomes more towards just growing up. You know, we're all getting older and we all have these needs. And our children have somewhat the same needs that we had. They want to know where their parents and grandparents came from. And I think we want to try and sustain the various types of activities that interest not only us as we get older, but are of interest to our children as they come along behind us.
So it's kind of like laying down new roots in Korea.
That's right. Yeah. We feel that we're laying the groundwork for the future generation.
And we hear that UN-affiliated organizations are also taking an interest in IKAA. So are you receiving any support, or is there any interaction going on right now with these organizations?
We were actually invited to be an observer at the Hague Convention in 2005 and 2010. And in 2010, they actually allowed us to present a paper to them on post-adoption services. And at least a couple of those have been included in some of the recent symposiums that they've done. The reason they invited us was because we do represent multitude countries of Korean adoptees, and not just one or two. And so I think they were interested to know if we can help portray what the different needs are for the children that are in the different countries. And then we also have a number of supporters here, both corporate and governmental, that helped with the gatherings themselves.
You said before, because the IKAA is very unique, there are no other sort of international organizations of Chinese adoptees or other countries, only the IKAA, right?
For IKAA, where it's primarily, or it is, all Korean. I know that there are, for instance, Chinese association groups, but as far as I know, there's no overall group within the world. It's just in the US or just in a certain country in Europe. And I'm guessing that because they'll get older, they'll eventually do somewhat the same thing that we've done. And I know that some of these associations are looking to our associations because Korean adoptees have been around for 60 years. And now the Chinese adoptees have been around for about 20 or 25. And the Filipino adoptees and others are really looking for our structure and how we're making this success. And I think if we can help them do that, we'll certainly try.
I think that's a great thing as well. Any support from the Korean government? I know there probably wasn't any before. Have things changed? Perceptions? We're talking a little
they've
bit.
changed a little bit. The Korean government did definitely support for this 2013 gathering, which we were very grateful for. It certainly makes it easier when there's funding available. The difficult part comes when they want to, they give it with no strings attached. And then after they give you the funding, then they want you to do certain things, which we don't mind if they're reasonable. But we also realize that we're all adults and we have to make our own decisions. So we just want to make sure that if we're doing it for the adoptees and not for a government or a corporate purpose that that whoever's giving funding is. And we've had to actually turn down some funding in the past because a corporation may want us to only focus on their products, let's say, and not necessarily focus on some other organization's products. And we have to be careful to make sure that we're doing what's best for what we feel for the adoptees and not necessarily what's best for the sponsors that are doing it.
Right. Well, I'm talking with Mr. Tim Hong, president of IKAA, and we'll be right back after this.
Her mother is Korean, so
yeah.
She told her, if you don't speak Korean, I'll rip off your lips. I get the gist of conversation. I think I'm too lazy. Just 20 years ago, I had a woman came up to me in the subway. Where were you from? And I said I was adopted. And she said, oh, I'm so sorry. But she patted me on the head. But now, when I mention it to someone here, they seem to understand that,
So as I mentioned in the very beginning, in the opening, Korea is the only OECD country that still has international adoption for its children. So high international adoption rate, low domestic rate. Why do you think this is so? And are there any other countries that are like this?
I'm not sure if there are others. I would think that maybe China might be, but I'm not very aware of what happens there. I think that as the countries have become more successful domestically, I think that they will change. And I know that even though there's close to 200,000 adoptees out of Korea, the numbers over the last 3, 4, 5 years have certainly shifted. And as it becomes more, I don't want to say popular because sometimes that's what we think, but as it becomes more accepted, I think that will continue to change, hopefully. If a child can be adopted to a Korean family and grow up in Korea, I think they'll probably feel more satisfaction to be able to do that because they don't have to go back to find their roots. But I also know that the Korean culture has, deep-seated traditions that make it very difficult to adopt, and it's sometimes hidden. And we just have to, hopefully become more open with the adoptions in order to make it more acceptable in Korea.
So given your own personal experience, you would say that domestic adoption is easier for the child and
ultimately
more recommendable.
Yeah, ultimately I think it would be. We sometimes, even though we're adopted overseas, we're satisfied with who we are and what we grew up with. But I think deep down a lot of adoptees feel that maybe there's something missing. I know that if I would have grown up here, I would have probably had a horrible life, or not certainly as good as it has turned out. But I would have spoken fluent Korean, and now I don't. I would have probably had a lot more Korean food in the past than I do. I mean, who knows? That's why I always tell the adoptees, whatever's happened to you in the past, you can't change that. And all you can do is change where you go forward. And as long as we look at that, doesn't matter if we're here or if we're in the US or Europe, we'll just have to make the best of what we have and who we are.
I think your optimistic outlook and your enthusiasm and your encouragement is probably an inspiration to many adoptees. But aside from that also, what sort of institutional support do adoptees need if they maybe decide to settle down in Korea?
I think the biggest one's going to be language. They need to be able to speak Korean. Unfortunately, I know a number of adoptees who have been here maybe 10 or 12 years and speak very rudimentary Korean. If they could become more fluent, I think that would help them in every aspect. I think it's easy for us as we get older to become lazy in what we want to do. And that we just feel that, well, we're in a foreign country, we're going to, it's difficult. We'll never be accepted as Korean, so then we just don't do it. Whereas if you're going to live here, I think, whether you're in Korea or Italy or wherever, you learn the language and you try and assimilate into that culture. And I think that's what we really need the services to be able to do that. If there are educational services that can help for once you learn the language to be able to continue on in your own career, I think opportunities for that, scholarships, would be beneficial as well.
Right. So you have an office here in Seoul as well, or?
We do not. We would love to.
You wouldn't want to do that?
And we're talking about trying to set something up, but the process to do it, we're finding is very difficult. So we'll have to see how that goes.
What about general people's perceptions? Is there anything that we can do in how we regard or how we, I don't know if treat is the right word, how could we help adoptees who want to settle here?
Well, the one thing would be don't feel pity. Some adoptees like the pity, but I think the vast majority don't want it and don't need it. If the Korean public can just accept a person as being adopted, I think that's really the best and easiest way. There's a study in the United States that says 1 of 8 people know someone who's adopted. And I think once Korea becomes more aware of adoptees, I think they'll probably start to get into the same position.
Well, Mr. Holm, I would like to thank you once again for appearing on Heart to Heart, and I wish you the best of luck as the former president, I guess, of IKAA. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. And that was our conversation with Mr. Holm, the president of IKAA. You can watch a rebroadcast of our interview on our homepage, arirantv.com. And please join us again next time. Bye-bye.